Hi
everyone!
Everybody, it's What We Read episode. I don't even know what episode we're on.
Yeah, we're extending.
This is like a massive season.
This is a massive season. I'd blame Kindle Unlimited. That's all that is.
It's also just because we both have a little more time to read both comics or books because we're at home.
Mostly comics.
The point is that this is an extra long season of What We Read, and we hope that you guys are enjoying seeing all of our thoughts on the things that we have been reading. I'm gonna kick things off. For me, this particular What We Read is gonna focus solely on all the ebook things I read. We're gonna start with a book that I actually completely forgot to mention in any of the old What We Reads. I read this a while ago, so excuse me if I'm a little fuzzy on the details. The book is called Don't Call the Wolf by Alexandra Ross. You're gonna see the cover here, which is the first thing that sort of caught my eye about it. It has a fairly straightforward premise. There is a young forest queen named Wren, and she's fighting a losing battle against the monsters that have been appearing in that forest for a while, ever since the golden dragon appeared for the first time. She ends up rescuing, completely on a whim, this skilled hunter named Lucas, and then she sees an opportunity to make a deal with him in order to have him take down this dragon to get rid of all the monsters in her forest and, you know, kind of save the day. But it turns out that they both have deeper secrets than that, and that is something they contend with as they journey to find the dragon so that Lucas can kill it. It was like a solid YA fantasy read. Didn't realize that it was actually inspired by a fairy tale called The Glass Mountain, which I've actually read before. It was interesting because there were two character perspectives, Lucas and Wren, and they both have very different perspectives on their time, just depending on like their situation in life. But it's funny because like at the beginning I was so interested and so intrigued, and then it slowly started waning as the book progressed, which is not a great sign. I did not mind going along on the journey with them, but I also wasn't particularly invested in seeing what was going to happen by the end of the book. Like I was just kind of like, okay. So it was weird because it started off really well paced, really exciting, and then it kind of got slower and slower, and then the ending kind of felt a bit thrown in there. It didn't end up becoming the new favorite that I was hoping it would be. It was a solid story though, I guess, and if you're looking for something maybe diverting, I would suggest borrowing it, not buying this one. The second book, however, is also a review book that I got. It's The Paper Girl of Paris by Jordan Taylor. I went into it only remembering that it was set in Paris. I didn't really think too much about the synopsis, but it's basically told in a dual timeline sort of style. So we have a present day timeline where you're following a girl named Alice. She and her parents are in Paris, and they're there because they are going to check out the apartment that Alice's grandmother left for her after her passing.
So it's Alice in Paris.
Yes. So they discover that the grandmother actually has this whole other like family that they didn't know about at all, and so Alice is determined to find out why.
Interesting.
It also has a perspective in the past. We follow Adeline, and she is in Paris right after the Nazi occupation actually, and she ends up getting involved with a sort of rebel group. It was hard for me to set down because I was really interested in seeing how both storylines would play out and when they would start to sort of merge and connect. I like that it also let me experience that time in history in a way that felt a bit more personal. Like it's not a story that you just read the dry facts in a book, but it's like this is the story of what could have happened to one individual during that time period. And I think for me that's always an interesting experience. While I didn't overly connect to either of the main characters, though I did prefer Adeline over Alice, I did really like the story, and I did end up like flying through it, especially towards the end. So that was really fun. I'm glad I read it. The next book that I'm going to talk about is American Royals by Catherine McGee. It's an alternate history where George Washington ends up becoming king instead of president.
Oh wow, that's
And so there's like a royal family,
monarchy
same thing,
instead,
yeah. So we basically are like the English in that there is a royal family and there's a succession in that family. The book follows 4 different perspectives, and each girl is tied to the royal family in some way. 2 are princesses, 1 is a friend of the princess, and 1 is a former paramour of the prince. The thing about Catherine McGee's writing is it's so addictive. Like she writes in a way where it's like you know something bad is gonna happen but you just can't look away. It's very Gossip Girl. I was really interested in the story, really. I particularly enjoyed reading Beatrice and Sam and Nina, not so much the other girl, Daphne I think that's her name, because I don't like her. It was really fun. I did read it a little slower than I was expecting, and I think it's because it's actually quite long for a book of that type, but it was still pretty interesting. I like how she wove in the alternate history. I definitely am curious to see like how everything plays out in the next book after the way it ends. So I'm glad I did finally read it. That one is really entertaining. If you want something that's sort of like escapist, I highly recommend checking that one out. I think that's enough from me for now.
For now, a little pause.
A little pause to let Mackie go on a comics tangent for a while.
Yes, it's been a 5-month comics tangent now. I'm gonna start with, they're kind of duologies. Okay. Like they would be the counterpart of like duology sort of in a comics piece, where you have 2 trade paperback all in the same series. I'm gonna start with Jeff Johns of Teen Titans fame. Decided to do a little modern take on Greek mythology called Olympus, I want to say. And it's published in like 2 trade paperback volumes that are pretty short. And it sounds like an action mythology B-movie, just in terms of premise, because picture this, there's a bunch of college kids, just that alone, or grad students, I forget, on vacation off the coast of Greece. They decide to free dive into this sort of thing, and they dig up a, you know, like an old box, right? They take the box out of the water and literally open, like jimmy it open, and they find a jar with Greek hieroglyphs and whatever that, well, not hieroglyphs, but with Greek like writing. Apparently it's Pandora's box jar. The jar was open already, like there was no, like it was like a jar.
In that case, now they know chaos.
Yeah, now they know, and it's like this whole storm comes in, and then water pirates happen in on their boat.
That sounds pretty random.
Right? And then they just end up on an island, which is apparently Olympus, and they just have to fight through. It's like, you know, Greek mythology creature feature, which is a race all the way to the top, and it's, you know, the bad guys are the good guys, and the good guys, it's a thing. It would be a great movie if they were faithful to the panels. Like it's like a fun, like 1 hour kind of, we gotta get to the top, and all the girls are still in like bathing suits because, you know, that's action movies. Rolls. So I kind of give it a 3-star rating. My 3-star ratings aren't like the kiss of death for me. Like a kiss of death movies, I don't even. For me either. Yeah, but for me, there are 3 stars because I enjoyed it, but I'm not reading it again. And I won't tell people, hey, go check this thing out. So yeah, it was all right. So I mean, if you do like the premise and the idea of it, because it is an adult take on Greek mythology, and it was almost kind of like, spot the next coming Greek myth. Do you know who that is? You know, and then it works. And so it's literally every single Greek mythology, like mainstream, you know, creature was in there. So that's that. And the other piece that I kind of want to talk about today is Red Team by Garth Ennis. Now Garth Ennis is famous for like The Boys and, you know, Tankies and Battlefields and all of that kind of stuff. You know, he's done a lot of ultra-violent, thought-provoking, urban decay kind of, human beings are basic garbage kind of, you know, stuff, right? While set amidst the backdrop of gritty urban chaos, basically, within a structured system. So Red Team centers around 4 New York cops who were absolutely sick and tired of being led around by this sort of like local mobster type deal who is into the worst things. And they decide, since this guy knows every single loophole and he's been a step ahead of us, we'll just take him out. And that's sort of the premise. There was an old squad of, like, there's even some local lore that these 4 cops knew, where, you know, back in like the 50s or 60s, there was this huge mob, like murder, massacre, that nobody could trace who did it. They thought it was a rival gang, rival family. The local legend, it was a bunch of New York cops. So in the same vein of that,
interesting, that's
what Red Team is about, right? It's about 2 sort of veterans and 2, they're not rookies, but they're the younger kids, right? Maybe like a couple of generations removed. And they decide to band together, work hard, and start offing, you know, like
the bad guys.
The bad guys. They have rules. And this would have been a great either miniseries, like a Netflix 10-episode kind of deal, or even a 6-episode kind of deal, or a great movie. I gotta say, shout out to Craig Cermak. It really captures that gritty kind of urban feel to it. And it's now one of my favorite Garth Ennis like pieces. So if you like action, and you wouldn't think it's like, where are the vampires? Where are the dragons? I occasionally, and these are approachable technically assassins now, because they kill people like on purpose, secretly, like assassins. And they're approachable because they're good cops. It fits right within my genre.
Yeah, it does. All right, now that Maki is done with his comics tangent for this week, I'm actually going to kick off the rest of my part of this video by talking about a graphic novel. I actually got granted early access to a review copy of The Lost Carnival, which is by Michael Morecci and a couple of other people.
Who is it about?
The reason I wanted to read this is because it's about Dick Grayson. I obviously will read anything that he's involved in because I love him. The Lost Carnival is set in this world where Dick and his parents are still with the circus. They're alive and well.
How old is he?
He's like a teenager, 16, 17, I want to say.
So long after.
So like they're still alive in this world. He is kind of chomping at the bit to escape the circus because that's the only life he's ever known, and he wants more than that. One summer he actually ends up going to a rival carnival and meeting this girl there, and she kind of challenges her perspective, but they also get involved in some crazy shenanigans, and I'll leave it at that. First things first, I really like the coloring and the art style that they used for it because it was really easy to like read. It was also really fun to like look at the visuals.
Yeah, what were the tones that they used?
The tones were like blue toned and or sort of orange toned.
Yeah.
But the thing was, the story was not that great. It was a solid story, but
no
it just
complaints.
Wasn't like one of those stories that will really stick with you.
It sort of like didn't grab you and like keep you there forever.
And I'm just like, maybe it's partly because I'm so used to seeing Dick Grayson in a certain light, and to change essentially what the tragedy that sort of you know, shapes who he is as a person, obviously changes Dick as a character.
Yeah.
And that makes him a little bit different in the story. And then to me, I'm just like, I don't know about that. So while it was a really quick read, like, it's pretty short, it's under 200 pages and it's really quick. I can't necessarily say that this is probably one of the ones I would recommend from the new DC graphic novel stuff. If you are a Dick Grayson fan, you might enjoy it just for like the alternate world where Dick Grayson is like a surly teenager, maybe. Plus the artwork is fun to look at. And he's fun to look at, obviously. But if you're actually looking for like a story you could really sink your teeth into, this is probably not the one I would recommend.
Yeah, like basically a nice light read, I want to say.
Yeah, nice light, quick diversion. The next book I'm going to talk about is a review book. It is Seasons of the Storm, which is by Ella Cosimano. I'm not sure if it's actually going to be a series. It doesn't seem like it to me, just based on how the story plays out. But it's marked on Goodreads as a series starter, so I don't know. Seasons of the Storm is set in a world where each season is embodied by a person, and you have to kill the season that comes before you and be killed by the season that comes after. So spring kills winter, summer kills spring, autumn kills summer, and winter kills autumn. And it's a cycle that goes over and over and over again. The story is centered around a main character named Jack, who is a winter, and he is sick and tired sort of this cycle of life, because it's not really a real life. You just keep living and dying and living and dying, and only for your season, so you don't even get to experience the rest of the year. And it doesn't help that he's kind of in love with the season that kills him, and so he decides that he wants to find a way out for him and her, only to discover that it might take more than just the two of them in order to safely escape. Conceptually, the book is really, really good, and I was really excited to get into it because I have a thing about season magic. I think it's interesting and fun, and I so rarely get to see it in stories. And so that part of it I think was really great. Like, I did not expect the execution of it to be like it was. It's a little spoilery to say this, but it's actually more modern than I was expecting. I was thinking like fantastical flourishes or stuff like that. It's a very modern setup because there's a lot of technology involved in it as well, which is very interesting, and you'll see it when you start reading the book. At the beginning, for like a good 40% of the book, it was really slow. It was very much telling instead of showing, and it was really like a lot of day-to-day life, which is like fine, but it's also like you expect more, kinda, because the way the premise sounds makes it sound like so excited he's gonna escape and they're gonna get out together. So the first 40% dragged a little. I was a little concerned that I was just gonna be like, oh, this is okay. However, this is the type of book where the beginning is slow, but then it starts picking up, and then it keeps picking up until it hits the ending. It was pretty fun to see how it all played out. To be fair, it is very rare nowadays for a book to really throw me for a loop, like for me not to figure out how it's gonna end. There was a tiny detail about how it ended that I did not figure out, which is crucial to it, which was, to me, is a very impressive thing. And I also really like the action scenes and stuff, and like the group dynamics, because there's a lot of characters in this story. Jack and the spring he's in love with, whose name is Fleur, they are surrounded by other people in the story, and the other people were also really fun, a cast to read about. So do I think it's worth reading? I think if you find the premise interesting, it's worth a shot. Not sure how you'll feel about the execution. I don't know if you'll be like me, where you're kind of like 50-50 still on how it was done. It did manage to surprise me at the end, and it did manage to entertain me through the rest of the book after the first 40%. Also, I think it would make a great like anime, honestly.
Oh, there you go. No, yeah, just
like
the image, just the imagery
like the
alone.
The seasonal magic in action in anime form. The last book I'm going to talk about is a book that I actually just finished today. That book is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. It is a mystery thriller.
Interesting.
The reason why I wanted to read it so badly was not only because I kept seeing the title everywhere, but because the premise of it kind of reminds me of my favorite of the two that I've read. My favorite Agatha Christie novel, And Then There Were None. Essentially, in The Guest List, all of these people are on an island that's kind of remote. It's off the coast of Ireland. Everyone is there for a wedding, but on the wedding night, something goes terribly wrong. And so the book follows a cast of characters as you try to unravel who died and who was behind the death. At first I was like, okay, I don't know where this is going. It's a very character-driven kind of mystery, I guess is what I want to say, because you really do get perspectives one by one. Like, you get introduced to some of the bridal party and some of the staff, and like, it's an interesting thing because you're getting to know them with every single chapter. The fun part of that for me is that it sort of makes it hard for you to figure out who you can actually trust and who you're kind of like, I don't like you. It was fun. I actually listened to it on audiobook through Libra FM, so if you want to check out Libra FM, by the way, I will link that down below. I listened to it on audio, and that was really fun because it's an ensemble cast. So every single perspective had a different narrator, which made it easy to tell them apart. And it made it more exciting, but also terrifying, because you're like hearing all of these things. And the way I described this book to Kristen actually today was, it's a mystery where like the entire thing is filled with people who are literally making train wreck life decisions.
Sure.
Or have had trains run them over. Like, it's one or the other, really.
It's one or the other.
I'm the type of person who's like, not every character has to be perfect or more on the good side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to me when authors decide to make characters complex and flawed, like to expose their weaknesses almost immediately, but to still manage to make them someone you want to invest your time and attention in when you're reading. And I think Lucy Foley did that pretty well with the guest list. At first, at the beginning, much like Seasons of the Storm, like at the beginning, because you're kind of meeting everyone and kind of getting a sense of the setting, it's a little slow. But then when you start getting to know every single character better, you're kind of like, well, he probably did the thing. Or she probably did the thing. It's like a lot of like building up of clues and suspicions and all of that good stuff. And it ended pretty well, if a little quickly for my taste. So I actually ended up enjoying this one more than I expected to. So I would definitely recommend checking it out. And if you're an audiobook person, definitely give the audiobook a listen because it was really cool to do it that way. That is all of the stuff that I actually wanted to talk about for this What We Read. We hope you enjoyed the video. If you have thoughts on any of the books we mentioned or suggestions for things that we should add to our reading list, probably me, not so much Maggie since he's not reading that many books, feel free to leave that in the comments.
Only because I'm trying to write one.
And we hope you guys are doing well. We wish you all of the good vibes and good health, and if you are out there on the front lines working, we are thinking of you and grateful for all that you do.
Absolutely grateful. You're awesome.
See you guys for another video next week. Bye.